Hi there. How are you,
Hi.
Al? Hi, Mona.
Hi.
Awesome.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Yes.
Oh,
Thank
yeah.
you.
So good to see you guys. Well, welcome to another Coffee Talk with Mona and Al. This week we are talking about social stigma and mental health as a part of our Let's Talk About Stigma series. This month is focused on mental health. Last month we talked about addiction, and coming up in March we'll be breaking down stigma and poverty. Today we're going to be talking with Penny Stittler. She works with the American Mental Health Association, or Mental Health America.
Mental Health America of Licking County. That's
Absolutely. And you do some community efforts in the area to address stigma and address folks with mental health, help make their lives better. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Yes, our whole purpose is to help break down stigma in our community, and we do that through education. We feel that that's the best way to teach people about mental illness, mental health, how you have one, how you get to have the other, and what you can do when you're confronted with somebody that's exhibiting signs and symptoms, how you can help them, what our resources are in our community. So most of our efforts with our 8 different programs that we deliver revolve around mental health and helping our entire community be healthier.
Wow, that's so wonderful. I know you work with Donna Waite, who was on a previous episode with us.
Yes, Donna's on our staff, so that her 2 programs that she runs, Bridges Out of Poverty and Compeer, are both programs of Mental Health America of Licking County.
Awesome. So very cool.
It's cool. I think one thing when it comes to almost any issue, is that we focus on the deficit in our communities. Like, we don't have XYZ, to support whatever problem we need to support, which in some sense is true, but I think we also forget that we do have a lot of assets in our community that are there and need amplifying, or just even knowing that they're there, to support those in need too. So doing the work you do is always a good reminder to have for us and the community as a whole.
Thank you. Yeah, and what we try to do really is get people connected with the multitude of resources that we do have in our community so that they can work through whatever issues they may have. And we know that if the earlier we can get people connected, the better their outcomes will be.
Absolutely. So it's bringing people together using education as a tool to kind of change how we think about these things, because the stigma is something that we've talked about as a historical thing. It's something that is not new. It's been in our society for a long time. It's only within the past 50 or so years, even in the last decade, the conversation around mental health has changed so much.
Right. In fact, Mental Health America, the national organization, which is headquartered in Washington, D.C., began when the big institutions that housed people with mental illnesses were closed. And people were kind of put out into our society, and they had to figure out their way, their path, what are their resources, and how are they going to survive, and what treatments are available for them, and things like that. And we talk at Mental Health America, there's a story of the Mental Health America bell, which is a huge 300 plus pound bell made out of metal. And what it's made out of is all of the chains that were used in those mental institutions to hold back people who were ill with mental health issues. And when those institutions were all closed, they actually took all those chains and melted them down and created this incredible bell that tells the story.
Wow.
That's powerful.
It's a different way of looking at how to help people instead of basically incarcerating them, right? And chaining them. Now we are trying to help them walk through what is it that you need? What are your signs and symptoms? what kind of treatments are there that would be helpful for you. And it could be anything from therapy with a counselor to self-care, self-help type things, support groups, medications. Some people do need hospitalization, but it used to be that as a whole, people with mental illness were put into a mental health institution.
And it wasn't necessarily like humane treatment in that institution.
Right. Well, anytime you hear that people have been shackled, that tells you something right there.
Absolutely. And I love that symbology of the bell too, like not quite an alarm, but it's like making it heard, like hearing out people's stories, what people are experiencing inside, because we all have these individual worlds, and it's without talking about it, it's really hard to understand where another person's coming from, what they're experiencing, especially with mental health, because there's so many things you can't even imagine.
Right. And when we talk about stigma around mental illness, people are afraid to talk about it often if they haven't felt accepted, or they feel like they've been ostracized or looked at funny or ignored, or whatever it might be, whatever treatment they feel that they've gotten from the people around them. So they may be embarrassed by it, afraid of it. Again, they're ignorant of what it's about. Where did it come from? Why is this happening to me or to my loved one? What do these signs and symptoms really mean? And what is available? People just don't know. They're not well educated on what's available to them. So all of those things make stigma really almost dangerous for people with mental illness, because they end up making decisions that are not going to help them overcome this illness. And, you know, we talk about mental illness and physical illness. At MHA, we have a saying, there's no health without mental health. And that's so true. And yet we treat physical illness and mental illness so differently, when really they're all about the whole person. And we need to be looking at the entire person, head, body, everything, and taking care of the whole person. And not just saying, well, you have a broken bone, so we're going to set that bone. You know, we talk a lot about how back in the day, Betty Ford was the first woman that came out publicly who was well known to say she had breast cancer. And she was telling people, go get mammograms. It can be discovered. You can be treated. You can survive this. Prior to her coming out publicly with that information, women with breast cancer were ostracized and their families were shunned. People felt that they must have come from a dirty house, or they must have done something wrong. And oh, by the way, it might be contagious. Again, education, 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 right? People just didn't understand what it meant to have breast cancer, where it came from, what the ramifications of it might be, how it could affect other people. Look how far we've come. Today, I don't know if you two know people who have had breast cancer. I know many. I lost a number of friends and people close to me to that horrendous disease. But what we do now is we talk about it. We say, oh my goodness, did you hear about so-and-so? She has breast cancer. We're all putting meals together. We're taking her kids. We're driving her to appointments. We're running a race. We're wearing pink. You know, we're raising money. We're doing everything we can to fight this disease. I look forward to the day when we have a run for mental health and everybody gathers together and helps the person that somebody says, hey, so-and-so has depression. And everyone will say, what can I do to help? Instead of now going, I kind of don't want to have anything to do with that person, right? We've come a long way with some diseases, and I'd love to see us do the same thing with mental illness.
Absolutely. And I think since we're getting into structural stigma around mental illness, I think it's really important to, as you were saying, Penny, why are you feeling this way? Or what is the root problem of whatever you're going through, right? It's what has caused a person to be depressed or going through everything. There's a lot of structures in place that can kind of exacerbate existing mental illness or even create it in and of itself as well, or make it worse by not allowing people to have access to what they need. And then that stigma is embedded in the system as well, of like, if you can't get yourself up or pull yourself up out of whatever you're going through, then it's somehow a failure on you, right? And not a failure on the systems around you that weren't able to support you in any way, especially with a mental illness, because that's not seen as important or as harmful as like a broken leg or cancer or things like that. So that structural piece is really important, I think, when it comes to mental health and how we can support those suffering with mental illness.
Right. We know so much about how many people can anticipate ultimately having a mental illness in their lifetime. We know that right now, and really during COVID, it's probably way worse. We just don't have those numbers yet. But outside of this COVID pandemic, typically 1 in 5 people every single year experience a mental health issue, varying degrees of severity. So not all requiring hospitalization or medication, but needing some attention, needing to understand what's happening to the person and getting help. On average, in the United States, people wait 10 years from those early onset of symptoms until they receive a diagnosis and subsequent treatment. So 10 years, when you think about any physical illness, if you waited 10 years to get help for it, you'd be in pretty bad shape. So when we talk about better outcomes, that's what I mean. If you can have early diagnosis and early intervention with a mental health issue, the person's quality of life is just going to be so much better. And when we know that on average, mental health issues come to light at age 14, think about that next 10 years and all the things that people go through developmentally and planning for life with relationships and education and figuring out where they want to be and who they want to be, right? From age 14 to 24, those are huge years. And if you're impacted by a mental health issue and it's keeping you from being all that you can be, that's really scary and very detrimental to the person's overall well-being and like I said, their development as a human being.
Absolutely. I just turned 24, and you're so right on the money with the timing, because I was like, these last 10 years in that reflection, I'm like, I've really done a lot of work, but it's like still an ongoing thing. And I'm just so grateful to have been in an environment where mental health was prioritized and to be like, kind of to take that step for myself. And I think that that's something that you're saying with that vision that you shared with the running and like treating mental health and mental illness kind of the same way we would a physical illness, but honoring it and fighting for it, fighting for the respect that people deserve, not to be turned away from by society in any way, because it's like, that's how we lose people. And something we've been talking a lot with the think tank is these deaths of despair, folks that are either taking their own lives or overdosing, and we're losing people, a lot of people. And it's not on a downward trend. The trend's going up, and part of it's because of COVID, part of it's because of the economy. And these are structural things, but it's important to talk about because this is a crucial time for us to not just reflect, but also act and bring people back in, like figure out how we can keep people from going over the edge, basically.
Right.
And stigma is a huge part of that. It's how people think about themselves, how people think about each other is really crucial, and how we can support each other as a community, and take care of ourselves.
Sure. Yep, that's absolutely so critical. At MHA, we talk about before stage 4. And when you hear stage 4, you think cancer, you think a really horrendous diagnosis, right? It's probably life-threatening. And when we talk about that 10-year gap between onset of symptoms and diagnosis, we want people to get help before they get to that 10-year point and stage 4. We want to start those conversations way, way earlier. You talk about honoring the person and what they're going through, and it's recognition, it's having access to care, it's knowing that you need care. You know, it's all of those things put together. So we want those conversations to begin way before stage 4, so that we don't end up with people either incarcerated or hospitalized or dead because they haven't received the care and the attention that they needed.
Absolutely. So Penny, you've kind of touched on this a bit. And if you feel comfortable sharing this or not, it's totally okay. How have you seen stigma personally impact you or your work or those that you work with? Which we've all alluded to a bit here.
My work revolves around it. You know, that's part of why MHA exists, is to break down stigma and to make sure that people in our community are receiving the attention they need for the illness that they have. So our work constantly revolves around that. I'm on so many committees and coalitions working to help improve the lives of the people that live in Licking County. Everything from overdose. There's a coalition around overdose prevention. We've got a reentry coalition. We've got, you know, for people that have been incarcerated and are coming back to our communities. And so many of them have some kind of a mental health issue. There's so much work being done in our community around poverty. And poverty is a traumatic experience that is, you know, can be very extended. We talk now about COVID and how it is causing this constant community traumatic experience. It's been this thing that's been happening, and it's overlying everything for everybody right now. So we have a lot of effect on our mental health, our overall community well-being right now. So there are just so many things that impact, and then think about everything else that's been going on in our world in the last 12 months. It didn't just start, but there's been a lot more attention on inequity, racial issues, the political turmoil, for lack of anything better that I can call it. There just have been so many things happening, and a lot of people that are getting really upset all the time about all these things that are happening. So it's been a very, very difficult year. And we're going into year 2, I'm afraid, and it's not going to get it. I'm hopeful with vaccines and things that we'll see things lighten up some, but we're not done. We're not through this yet by a long shot. So it's a lot of pressure. A lot of people have lost jobs. A lot of people have had to change lifestyles. Things are so different from what our normal had been, and that can cause onset of anxiety and depression and things like that. So we have a lot of people that are experiencing a lot of new things, I'm sure.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you mentioned the complexities of COVID and this last year, 2020, that it's a landmark year in our timeline. And it's something where we're kind of balancing the isolation that we all find ourselves dealing with, and reaching out. Like how do you stay engaged in the community? How do you reach out to folks that might need you, or keeping people together rather than isolation? Because I think of the rat experiment, where the rat park, where that community really changes the behavior, because if you don't have that, then that's where people fall into their own, maybe like mental health issues, whether it's addiction, all that. We need each other to thrive, and right now it's really hard just because of the circumstances. it's hard too, because with social stigma, we kind of have these like old world things. Like we don't have like mental asylums, we don't have like these things, but a lot of the language permeates through our society and the way we talk about mental health, even like in casual ways when we're not actually talking about it, but like something's crazy or something's like you're mental, like stuff like that can be harmful too. And it's important to address that so that we can kind of evolve past that language and become more inclusive and not accidentally hurt someone who's experiencing these things firsthand. So I was wondering if you had more education on that you could share with us.
Yes, I do. I'm a certified mental health first aid trainer, which is a program that's available to anybody in our community. So if anyone's interested, give me a call. We can do it virtually now. It used to be only in an 8-hour session that it was available. So like a full day training or 2 half days or whatever. And now we can do it online and kind of do a blended version where people do a little bit of their own work ahead of time, and then we do 5-6 hours online doing the training. But there's a great exercise that we do in mental health first aid where we just say, hey, tell me the terminology that you've used or you've heard people use. I don't want to accuse anybody of using the language, but tell me what you've heard when people are talking about someone who is mentally ill. And and I'll get them started. I'll say things like one fry short of a Happy Meal, or, that, like you said, crazy, insane, all of those terms. There are a million of them. And we just start writing them down on a flip chart. And when everyone's done, we take that big piece of flip chart paper and we rip it off and we crumple it up and we throw it away and say, please stop using that kind of language. It's so hurtful. It's so stigmatizing. And, we've gotten rid of the word retarded in our language, in our everyday conversations when we speak about a person. No one, if anyone said that in a conversation, I think 99% of the human beings in this country would say, what? What did you say? How dare you? That's so rude, right? No one would accept that. But somehow crazy and wacko and, all of those kinds of terms are still accepted. So you're absolutely right. We want to get to that place where we're no longer referring to people with terms that could be talking about their brain health. We really want to avoid that, and maybe say he's having a really hard day, or he's not acting quite the way he normally does. Something's a little off. I'm just not sure what it is. And here's what I'm seeing, rather than he's crazy, or any one of those other terms that people tend to use. And I'll tell you, it's a powerful exercise because people sit there and they start throwing these things out. And then when you say that to them, they're like, oh, I get it. I see.
Absolutely. And I think I took a class on disability in college, and my professor had, I think, a 2-3 page little booklet of like all the terms like crazy and things we shouldn't be saying, and replacing it with something. If you want to say something's crazy, or if that's your default, substitute it with this. And kind of like lets us break down everyday language that we think is harmless, but really is, and kind of replaces it with something that isn't stigmatized as well. So I can try to find that and share it
That's great,
with
yeah.
everyone on our page. Or I'm sure there's a bunch out there too. So it's super, super helpful. And when you think about it a bit too, I can't help but think that language, intentional or not, whoever's using it, is used to dismiss the root problem, and kind of toss away the complexities of who you're referring to, what you're referring to. And then that comes with the thinking it isn't harmful, right? Or dismissing yourself for saying, oh, I didn't mean that, right? And it's like, well, that may or may not be true, but let's unpack why that is an internalized stigma of yours, right? There's no shame or judgment, but let's not dismiss it. Let's not deflect here.
Right.
which we see.
And they are very, I mean, we're using the word crazy. That is a very common thing for us to say, my schedule has been crazy, or, you know, whatever. COVID has been crazy. But yeah, I think if we could just be a little more cognizant of that. I mean, if I start to say that word now, I literally stop myself, you know, and haven't used it in quite some time, but it is really easy to have that slip into your daily language.
Absolutely. But I love like this step of taking and putting intention into the language that we use daily and making it more compassionate, like the way that you were saying, to replace it with like thinking and processing, recognizing that this person's acting differently. It's like that's so much deeper, and it has so much more impact, and a positive impact on this relationship between these people in that example. And you mentioned the R word campaign, and I think it automatically came up in my mind, this one commercial with Hillary Duff in the R word campaign, and I was like, that's what we're doing. Like, this is the campaign that we have. Let's talk about stigma. We're putting it out there for people to see and to think about how they use these terms, how they experience social stigma, how they may unintentionally stigmatize other people, whether it be addiction, mental health, or poverty. All these things are so intertwined and connected, but I'm just honored to be working with you guys doing this stuff.
Yeah. You know, this makes me remember Mental Health America of Ohio, which is in Franklin County, used to be called Mental Health America of Franklin County, but they recently went to of Ohio. They did a marketing campaign that was on some of the Columbus television stations called Stop the Crazy Talk. You can find it. Go look it up. And it's an excellent explanation of why we should stop using this language. And they really delved into it and got some great recognition and some awards and things for that campaign.
That sounds awesome. Well, we could plug that in, Al, to a post or something, share those resources. That sounds wonderful. So Al, we've been mentioning it all throughout this interview so far, but we know internalized stigma, public stigma, and structural stigma are related. And we also understand that we should take a multifaceted approach when it comes to, or a holistic approach when it comes to wanting to address these issues, and see the person as a whole and what all the factors that could contribute to mental illness, addiction, poverty, fill in the blank. But could you speak to more on how you see the three being related, Penny? Internalized, public, and structural?
Let's see, I've never really thought about those three specific things, but internalized, obviously people, it's that fear and that embarrassment that keeps them from speaking out. And then public, so I think, let's see, where do I see that? I just think it's out there. You know, anytime anyone is speaking about people, or there are television shows and there's media and movies and things are done that way, where people start laughing about a situation or about a person, and it's because they're picking at someone or they're making fun of somebody who is exhibiting those signs, right, or symptoms and behaviors that are a result of a mental health issue. And then structurally, you know, that goes back to all of the policy stuff that we're all working on. And again, Mental Health America of Ohio is kind of our policy center for the state, and that they're the ones working with our state government and so on. And Mental Health America National does a lot of policy work at the federal level and across all the states, because we're trying to make sure that health insurance and care and housing and so many things are not causing more problems for people that live with mental health issues. So I think, you know, they all work together, that's for sure. Everything is so intertwined. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really complex at the same time too.
Mhm.
It's not a simple answer or not.
Right.
I think it's difficult to kind of actually see how the three are connected in a lot of ways, but also simple at the same time. I think it's easier to see how they kind of work off of each other, right? And kind of
Sure.
a bigger blow to the pain and lack of resources, or like that internalized stigma, for example, you thinking that you're the problem, you're the reason why you're at where you're at. If you can't pull yourself up and fix yourself, then it's your fault. I think the system can come back and use that and say, you're right, you're absolutely right. You got yourself there, so why should we provide you with the resources that you would need to actually help yourself? And it kind of uses this, I think it's used in a lot of ways to deflect from, again, the real problem, right? All these internalized public and structural stigma kind of work together to really oppress and silence those that are in need of the most help, the most community, the most healing, all silenced in a way so they can't actually achieve those things when the three are at work together, which is extremely important to talk about the three. And there's more. It's not just, stigma isn't just limited to those three as well.
No, it's not.
But it is a lot of factors. It's not just, we can't solve all these by making sure that I treat you fairly, Al treats me fairly, and on a personal level, we're all good stigma-wise, and we know what to talk about. And it's much deeper. It's an important part, but not the whole.
You know, you
solution.
asked about personally how I've been impacted. I'm not going to get into personal, like my history or anything like that, but I do know this is kind of an interesting thing. At one time when my doctor of many, many years retired and I needed to find a new doctor, it took me a while to land on a specific physician, because the first person I was having a conversation with, and she knew I worked for Mental Health America, and she said, well, those people, they ignore our advice and they don't come forward when they need help. And I just kind of went, if that's how they're being treated when they come in here, I can understand why they don't want to come forward. I mean, she just was so derogatory in her terminology. So I didn't go to that doctor. And then the next doctor said, I asked her why she wasn't using, you know, how you do the questionnaire every time you go to a doctor's office and check the boxes and say how long you have felt a certain way, or have you been sleeping well, and have you, you know, all those questions. And several of those questions can be that can be embedded in that questionnaire, can indicate what your mental stamina is and what your current mental health is. And people don't always realize that that's what's being asked, but the doctors can figure it out, right? Based on the answers to a couple of questions. And I asked her, you aren't asking any of those mental health questions, why not? And she said, oh, the insurance companies won't pay for that. And I said, but you're supposed to be treating the whole person.
Yeah.
If somebody's suffering with something, don't you want to get to the bottom of that? I mean, I couldn't believe that she would not even try to get to the bottom of something or figure out if somebody's dealing with something, because the insurance companies wouldn't pay for it. So I didn't go to that doctor either. This has all been a number of years ago that I had to make this change. But it's so interesting to me that I was running into these people that are part of the, you know, who someone would go to if they are experiencing some issue with their health, mental or physical. And that was how these two people in particular were responding. One is no longer in our community. The second one, apparently, the system that she works with they have changed that document that is filled out now, because I did go to the central office and ask about it and push for a change. So anyway, yeah, just, those kinds of things to me are so important. And that was I didn't need it. It wasn't my need at the moment, but it was the way they reacted that I thought, this is wrong. I can't support you in the way you're handling this. If everybody would do that, it would go a long way.
Penny, I think we need more mental health warriors like yourself. You have dedicated your career to this fight, and it's just so great to have you on the show.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
Fun to have, it's really fun to talk to you two and hear where you're coming at it from too. I mean, you are young champions of mental health as well, and it's kudos to you. It's really wonderful to see.
It's a fight, I think it's education, like you said, and then also creating a culture of wellness and mental health, like teaching that in schools, like as a how do you accumulate a well and happy lifestyle. It's not necessarily something that you grow up learning about. And there's things that you can do from a young age besides just like being aware that mental illness exists, which is kind of what my health program at my like middle school was, just like depression is a thing, anxiety is a thing, there's these things.
Yeah, hopefully it's come a long way since then, and we're now, the tack is now, hey, these things exist, and here are some signs and symptoms. If you see them in someone, yourself or a friend or a parent or other family member, here are some things you can do about it. Get help. Don't just sit back and observe it. Be aware that it's happening. Understand. I mean, we're not telling you to diagnose anybody. We're saying get help. Figure out what your local resources are.
Absolutely.
And I guess, I appreciate you saying that about me being a champion for people with mental health issues, and I totally am. The thing that I try really hard to do in my education that I do in our community, I write articles for a local newspaper. I do a lot of presentations. I never want to make anybody feel badly because maybe they've mishandled something. I really don't want to come at people like I'm mad at them or you were wrong or how dare you. I really want to come at it more from the point of view of, hey, it's a new day. You can still learn. We all have this opportunity to turn this thing around. And I want to bring people on board, and I don't want to ever make people not want to see me coming because they feel like I'm going to yell at them or anything like that. I never want that to be the thing. I always want people to feel like, oh, this is new for me. I've got to learn more. And hopefully we can just continually expand on how many people get what's happening.
Absolutely. And when you kind of when that shame and gatekeeping and you're a terrible person if you ever did think this, it just slows the whole mission down, right? We can't be excluding people, and there are exceptions, right? There is, I think, a blurry line between what can change, I guess, within a person and what can't in a certain way, but that's a very small percentage of folks, and it's by no means the broader population. And if we do try to act like it is, or that people aren't capable of change and growth with on the mental health side and people that might perpetrate stigma at the same time, then we can't collectively heal and grow and head in the same direction if we hold those grudges or see it as I'm better than you or you're better than me for knowing anything. We're all learning together.
Absolutely.
One thing that we touched on was the media, and I think that falls kind of in between the structural and the public social stigmas. And I think I'm just thinking about it because it's something so powerful. It touches just about everyone's like lives, but like in your mind, like your reality is shaped by the things that you absorb, how much media, what you see on TV, and what you hear on the news. It's so interesting to think about how in the future, how are we going to hold these kind of like folks accountable, but also how do we like how do we create more media that represents the true story about mental health and recovery and poverty, like the root causes? How do we address that in a way that we can share with folks? Like, I think it's really important to not just have kind of like an outside looking in perspective, but support artists that are creating work about their experiences, because that's the truth there for them. That's their truth. And that's something that's really important. And a part of our show is art and creativity and how healing these things are for your mental well-being. It's just good to put yourself out there, express yourself, create something, and then maybe destroy it. I don't know, do what you do. But yeah, so after this week, we'll be doing structural stigma, and then we'll be doing stigma, art, and mental health.
Nice.
So
Yeah, and I know you know from talking with Donna Waite, she really incorporates art into the work she does around recovery and mental well-being. She works with people that live with severe and persistent mental illness in the CompEAR program that's part of Mental Health America of Licking County. And she has a weekly art studio where people are able to create and just do what they're comfortable with. It's not, oh, that's good or bad art. It is more, this is a way to express yourself and put it all out there, whether it's writing or song or coloring or original art. So it's a very important tool for people to be able to incorporate into their lives.
absolutely.
We have another program too. The GIP program used to be called Girls in Progress, and we've changed those letters to now stand for Grit, Integrity, and Presence. It is a middle school program, and we just wanted to have it be a more inclusive program. There were just so many people that were dealing with some questions about all kinds of things. So we didn't want to pigeonhole people into who should be in that program. But anyway, the person that runs that, Sherry Johnston, does artwork. She uses art journaling as a tool for the people in that program. And it is a powerful tool. Again, I can remember when my children were younger and we would take a driving trip. Maybe one parent would be with one child, and we would call that windshield time. And it was amazing how they would talk, and you never knew what you were going to hear about during those moments. But it's kind of the same thing with an art journal, because you'll have this group of young people, maybe 8 young people sitting around a room and all drawing or creating art or whatever, and it just frees people up. They feel like they have more freedom to talk and express what they're feeling. And it's kind of interesting because sometimes when they're focused on their piece of art and they don't have to feel like they're in front of everybody talking, they feel like they can say more, or maybe just expose themselves a little bit more. It's really an interesting thing.
So cool. So cool. Well, I think we are going to wrap up here. Is there anything else we'd like to touch on before we let you go, Penny?
I think we've hit most of the things I wanted to talk about today. I know that part of what we do at MHA, we do prevention work, obviously, and prevention is huge because it's what happens before you need to intercede because somebody's ill, right? And we do a lot of universal prevention. So it's community-wide. We do a whole school in suicide prevention, or an entire organization will do a gatekeeper training or what have you. And we want everyone, the more people that we can teach about what to look for and what mental illness might look like in someone, and what the resources are that are at their disposal in our community, the better off we'll be. So that's our whole goal.
Is there anything that folks in the community can do to help support your efforts at Mental Health America?
Well, they can always donate. Right now, volunteering is really hard because we are not even having our entire staff in our building at any given time, because of social, and I don't call it social distancing. I call it physical distancing. We need to stay socially connected.
Yes.
So, but the physical distancing rules that we're trying to stick with, still, if we're going to have somebody in our office for an entire day, we don't want them to have to share an office space with somebody else and be at risk. So we're still keeping our distance that way. And so we're not allowing volunteers to come in at this point. At some point, we will get back to that. We can always use support. Obviously, if anybody has an extra little bit of money they'd like to throw our way, we will put it to excellent use. And there are things like, if you're shopping on Amazon, do this Amazon Smiles program and choose Mental Health America of Licking County. If you're shopping at Kroger, choose Mental Health America of Licking County. Easy ways to donate, and it doesn't cost you a thing.
Awesome.
We'll make
So
sure
cool.
to plug it into our pages. Make sure we'll send people your way because it's such important work that we need to uplift.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Of course. It was wonderful having you, Penny. We will plug all your information in on Facebook for folks to follow. This has been wonderful. And if you would like to come on again anytime, we would love to have you. I think kind of conversations could go on for hours and hours. So
absolutely, yes. We are not done. We are not finished, are we?
Right. Far from over. So this has been wonderful. Thank you, Al, Penny. Always a good time. I hope everyone has a wonderful day.
Thank you, Al and Mona. Take care, everybody.
Take care.
Bye.
All right. And one last thing, I just want to plug that the next Digital Justice Cafe, Digital Recovery Cafe, is coming up on March 5th. It'll be at 7 o'clock on Friday night. A great way to join your local community and some local artists to have a good time. And there's an open mic after, starting at 8:30. You're welcome to join us. The event will be on the Facebook page, so keep an eye out and keep up with the campaign. All right. Thank you, guys. You guys have a great day, okay?
Thanks, you too.
Everyone. Bye.